All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm Neil Boyd. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Axoflow, and I'm joined today by our CEO, Balazs Scheidler, and our CTO, Sándor Guba. Today, we're going to be talking about the data overload that's going on in your SIEMs and how Axoflow specifically addresses this problem, what's causing it. I'm going to have just briefly a sort of agenda here where we introduce the problem. We'll talk about the benefits of reducing the amount of data going to the SIEM, and then we'll specifically show you how Axoflow makes this really easy. Let me just get this out of the way. Most of this change that's going on in the industry today is being driven really by cost. All of the work that's going on with telemetry pipelines and all of the vendors that are jumping into the space, that's being driven by the fact that the data explosion is really gotten out of hand, and that the SIEM vendors are based their pricing on ingested data volume means that managing your SIEM, running your SIEM has really become unaffordable. But it's not just the cost of your SIEM that's problematic. Dumping all this data into the SIEM also means you have low quality data, and a lot of that data, 50 to 80%, can be redundant, and that can lead to serious performance issues for your threat hunters, the guys using and working with the data in the SIEM itself. Of course, the data pipes themselves are leaky, so there's a lack of good transparency into the overall health of the log capture pipeline, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. But the main point I want to make is that 28% year over year increase in data volumes, meaning that your security costs to your SIEM roughly double every 3 years. And of course, this is just an unsustainable problem. We're going to show you today what we do at Axoflow to help you solve this particular problem. And so with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over first to Balazs, who's going to talk about how we got here. Balazs?
Thank you, Neil, for the good points about data volume. And I would say that that's something that we see on the market in general. So organizations are looking for a solution with the focus of trying to reduce volume. And obviously, we are going to talk about that too today. But I would like to broaden the discussion a bit, because I think what we have is not just a data volume problem, but a data quality problem. And to really improve on our data security posture and really improve on how we work in our security operations centers, we need to address the quality problem as well. So with that in mind, talking about volume, talking about cost, we will also talk about data quality. And to understand how we got to the data quality and the data volume problem, I think it makes sense to talk a bit about history and this notion I call the security data trap. Obviously, SOCs feed on data. So you couldn't run a SOC without some form of data collection, some form of data that you can sweep through and try to find incidents and respond to those properly. And when we started this 10, 15 years ago, we immediately started with collecting some data that looked relevant, the most important, I would say, and also jumped into analyzing that. And that's how it all began. But then obviously we wanted to cover more and more things. So SOCs collected more data and implemented more analytics. But as it happened, collection is a lot easier than analytics. And also it seems to have an inherent value. But actually this situation ended up so that we overemphasized data collection over data analytics. And sometimes we lose the connection, or we lose the whys. Why do we collect this data in the first place? Why do we need it? What's the use case? Is that the right way to collect that data? Is that the most volume efficient way or not? And this is what I call the security data trap. And what it results in is that we have this data swamp. When we started, we imagined our security data repository as a nice clean lake. Everything feeds the data lake, and then we can always find the relevant data we are interested in for whatever detection we want to do. What we got is basically petabytes of data, the volume and the ingest increasing year over year. But if retention is going into the years, then this can easily become petabytes. And if some data is low quality, a lot of data, then it becomes very expensive to keep, and the value can be limited. Obviously, being in this data swamp situation is not a good thing. While we are being trapped in this swamp, we need to see that poor quality data, so the SWAMP itself is a hindrance to the entire security operations center. Research shows that 18% of SIEM detections never fire. And we can imagine that in a situation like that, detection engineering is very complex and expensive. Either if we are building new detections or we are trying to maintain new ones. And it's even worse because as we see from the 18% figure above, it's also fragile. And I also mentioned, storing petabytes of data is expensive, and obviously that applies here as well. And that prompts the question that we need to improve data quality to get out of the swamp. And there's the obvious question of how. And this is where Axoflow set out to help. If we run back 10, 15 years ago and started from scratch and try to avoid the trap, what would we do? Would existing practices be enough to avoid being trapped? I mean, just imagine that you did just that. You would need to go back and revisit existing data sources, why you collect them, what's the objective, what's the use case. You would need to check detections, whether they work or not, whether the data collection, the format, and the classification is right. And obviously, as you concentrate your efforts on a specific piece, the rest should remain operational because we are fixing a plane while it's in the air. So it cannot break anything else. We can easily imagine that this requires a concentrated effort until it is fully completed, which reaches into the years. And it really requires a senior security knowledge and expertise to implement that. So at least if we want to fix our data quality issue, which impacts our security posture a great deal. And if you want to fix the data volume issue, apart from the simple tricks, which we will also talk about, there needs to be a better way in improving data quality as a whole in our security operations centers. And well, what's the better alternative? Obviously, we can choose the CCVM way, what I just explained, go back to all the data sources, etc., etc. I would say that's very difficult and I mean, goes into the years. We could call it infeasible. We can just improve so much in a short period of time. Or we can choose to start using automation. And automation would help in working through your data sets and pushing the responsibility of classification and parsing to a vendor like Axoflow. We also help in monitoring the data flows and giving you feedback so that you can actually measure your progress. And obviously, once you have that, certain benefits arise, like data reduction, improved detection engineering, and all in all, a better security posture. So yes, data volume is an important problem. I think that opened the eyes of organizations that the change is needed. There are ways to do that easily and quickly, but the way we do it, we also help in the broader data quality problem. And I will give the word to Sándor to show how this works. Sándor?
Yeah, thank you, Balazs. So, you know, I'm the techie guy and I don't have much slides, but those are important. I will talk a little bit about it. And then we just, you know, go straight into how to reduce your data in practice. So the first is that what is required to reduce your data? So the data comes in, first you need to identify it. So especially if you are using syslog or some unidentified sources, first you need to make sure that, yeah, this is the kind of data that I want to work with. The second step is parsing the content. If you don't understand the content of the data, you can do reduction. That's obvious. And then you have to identify what noise and what not. I think this is the most important and the hardest part of the process, that you have to actually understand the content of your data to do effective reduction. You have to be a bit of the infrastructure side to do that, and on the analytics side a bit to understand what will be needed for, you know, running queries against your data. The next step is, of course, rework the data. So you need to maybe apply a scheme or translate some of the fields or enrich with information like that's coming from your infrastructure or something that's useful in your company. The last step is, you know, sending the data to the destination, which can be one or more. It can be an archive, it can be an analytic tool, it can be a SIEM. So there can be several different possibilities. And as data pipelines or telemetry pipelines becoming common, I wanted to highlight the differences how Axoflow and traditional pipelines approach the situation. So on the top, you can see those steps that I was already talking about: receive, parse, reduce, custom rule application, and deliver. So on the top, the purple ones, that's what is the telemetry pipeline responsible for. And the orange or mustard ones are what the user is responsible for. So in a traditional pipeline, I get the data on a protocol that will be handled by the pipeline itself, but I need to parse it. I need to create actual parsing rules. I need to create the reduction steps, and I need to create my own rules, which is obvious because it's your knowledge. And usually they help with the deliver, translating the protocols. On the other hand, Axoflow, it's tied together with the classification, parsing, and reduction part. So Axoflow will give you, at least for like third-party appliances like firewalls, routers, which is a big chunk of data that you are processing, the built-in parsing and reduction. And in my example, let me share my screen. I will show you why it's really important to have this piece in your telemetry pipeline. So this is my favorite starting point. This is the topology view of Axoflow, and I would love to go into the demo, but I don't have the time. So I will go right into the flows, which is the configuration part of Axoflow. And in a flow, just to get a basic understanding, if you create a flow, it can have a name, firewall flows. I can apply to one or more Axo routers, which is actually processing those steps. And I can assign a destination like Splunk, and I can create one or more processing steps in the process, like selecting the relevant messages whatsoever. So to save some time, I prepared a flow which do manually a Palo Alto reduction. And I have to highlight manually because I write it in my own hand in FilterX language. So you understand, which steps you would have to take care if you are doing the traditional way. So let's just, read together the description. So first, I will detect whether it's a Palo Alto message. I then have to parse those messages. I have some tricks in my sleeves, how to reduce the message. I have to format to the destination. And the last two is just, some helping. First of all, how to decide it's a Palo Alto message. For Palo Alto, we can use a simple regular expression. Let me show you an example message here. This is from the tapping of our pipeline. This can show you the raw messages that's coming in to your Axo router. And this is the raw message with the syslog header. And without the syslog header, we have this on, comma, and the date format. This is very Palo Alto specific, that the message begins with this. So why not use this information? So first, to identify that it will be a Palo Alto message, I will use this as an identification, regular expression, starting with 1, having the comma, and the format for the date format that we have. Next step is I need to parse this log because you see it's a comma separated value. So we can use a CSV parse. Of course, but in CSV, in Palo Alto message, you don't have the columns. So you have to go to the documentation or someone already created for you. You have to inject the column names into the parsing. And I could go even deeper, as Palo Alto has different type of messages, around 10 different types, and each has different column names. So just for the sake of example, I won't go into that, but this means that I would have to branch, based on the type of the message. So the first parsing would be, the first 5 column, and the others would be the real parsing of the message. So this is how it looks like when you actually want to parse a Palo Alto message with the long list of columns in the expression. You need to figure it out somewhere. And I will store this information into the method.parsed attribute. So if we go back to our tab, because I already applied this flow to my processes, I can see that from this message in the meta.parsed, I will have this better looking message with keys and values. I only just, understand it's Palo Alto and figured out traffic. I would have to do this like 10 more times. First, identifying the type, then that is a threat type or a lot of different type of messages. But let's just, go with the traffic logs. So if I go into the traffic logs, now I understand what's happening. There's a couple of different values that I can use for my reduction steps. And I should go to the input flow just for a quick second, because in my output flow, hence I already applied my flow, there won't be a lot of messages, and I just leave it there. So when I am analyzing a Palo Alto type of message, I can just go into analyzing. We use the built-in parsing for it to see what I don't need. And for example, there is this zone identifier, the source location and destination location, and I got the IP addresses as well. So these are just extra information, so which zones the traffic is going from to where. And these are not useful in my analytics. I can just answer this kind of information. So next step is, and this is just the example, I'm not saying you have to do this, it's just, for the sake of example, I will use an answer empties function that will get rid of the values that has 0 value or NA or none, or have this, like internal IP ranges for what we do. And if I go back here and just use my tapping, the output tapping, you will see that those, just a second, I need to filter for flow. Those informations won't be presented in those message. So let me get back to the event, go to the meta and parsed. And when I see dest, what was that? Dest, let me check. It was much easier when the source location and destination location, it's empty. So we already saved some bytes. And if you are sending terabytes of logs, that can be a lot together. We have one more step that we have to do. So to format the message into the destination format. If I want to send this, for example, to Splunk, I will want to reformat that into the CSV, use the format CSV, and set it to the log.body. And eventually, I haven't sent it to Splunk, I just sent it to OpenObserve, but the idea is the same. I will get this nicely formatted and reducted message in my destination. So this is what you have to do if you want to do reduction by hand for one appliance and one log types. This is why the automation is very useful. In Axoflow, we have more than 100 integration for different source types. And what you need to do only is just select the message types that you want. For example, I'm selecting all the logs that the network team is responsible for. I don't have to figure out, this probe is just, like a metering, I will show you later. This is just measuring the amount of logs passing through. And I have a reduction step. So when the logs get into Xrouter, it's being classified and parsed already, and the reduction I can enable or disable will apply the reduction steps for that specific type. So in this network log flow, if we have several different kind of appliances, I will show you that I have this from the team, where is my team host label network. We have Palo Alto and SonicWall as well. And the reduction step will apply the appropriate reduction for the specific appliance. I have another probe here, and that's all. The destination formatting will happen automatically as well. So everything, only the user-specific rules you can create here, like, I don't know, set another field or whatever you need. But all these automated, and you can use even the parsed content of the data or even the enriched metadata to route your rules. Yeah, and that's all what I wanted to show today. And just want to emphasize that this what I showed you is around 20% of what we're actually doing with Palo Alto Log. It's much more complex. So it would be like, like 50 more rules if I want to cover everything. And that's what we simplified here. And I wanted to show the metrics around the flow. We are providing peripheral metrics as well. You can see that there is selected messages, around 50% of the messages coming from the network team. And you see that there is zero reduction because it's the events. We are not dropping events, we're just reducing them. So when I see bytes, you can see that we are reducing 30% of the data that's coming in. And it's now 30%. It's highly based on what kind of data you have, the mixture, like Palo Alto, Forti, and whatsoever, and even what kind of messages, like threat, traffic, messages coming through. So it can vary between like 10 or even more than 60% as well. And
all right. Thanks, Sándor. That was really good. I'm glad you did that, not me. You made a really good point about the mixture, and I want to share a customer success story, and you'll see how the mixture of data has an impact on what the overall savings can be. This customer success story relates to a very large industrial concern. They're a global company, and they were pushing up against their tier level with their SIEM vendor and about to be moved into the 3 terabytes per day tier. They also had a number of new locations that they needed to add to their data collection tier. So that was a lot more data that was going to have to be paid for as well. And by deploying the Axoflow platform, they were able to add all of those new locations, reduce a significant amount of data, reduce a significant amount of spend, and they didn't jump to the next higher tier as well, which resulted in really a major form of savings for them. So the key results, obviously, reduce significant savings, but also reduce the number of incidents, faster detection, and more reliable data. Their tech stack, they were using universal forwarders and heavy forwarders, as well as syslog ng servers to feed Splunk. They had a cloud deployment of Splunk and also SecureWorks. And we replaced that with the Axoflow platform, which consists of AxoRouter, AxoLet, and the Axoflow console. The console is delivered via SaaS. And the 3 main data types that we worked around were Palo Alto logs, Windows events, and Zscaler logs as well. The overall results were a 50% reduction in overall SIEM spend. You can see the firewall traffic was reduced 32%, Windows went down 56%, and Zscaler traffic was reduced 36%. And of course, another key ingredient was we kept them out of that next step up in terms of their tier. The other thing that happens, and it happens almost every time we deploy, is we get a bunch of surprises. Or maybe I should say the customer gets a bunch of surprises. These guys were having very bursty traffic that was consuming up most of their monthly Splunk budget every month, but they had no idea what was going on. And the Axoflow console could immediately identify which devices, which were, in this case, were some individual syslog collection servers that were sending internal logs to Splunk, and they were being very bursty. And so we identified what the configuration problem was and just turned that off. But it also helps in terms of identifying message drops. We saw syslog parsing issues, and there are a bunch of abandoned disk buffers that we were able to find as well. And that sort of health check comes almost immediately with any deployment. And we often hear customers say things like, no, I'm not sending traffic over, or all that traffic over that load balancer the way you guys are showing it. And guess what? It turns out that they are. It's these kinds of surprises that the transparency of the platform brings to customers that helps, in addition to the notion of reducing traffic. So with that in mind, if you all have any questions, please drop them into the chat. And while we have the guys here, we can answer them. They can be as technical as you'd like. We'll give you guys a minute to think about a question or two. And as they come in, I'll read them, and Sándor and Balazs can answer them.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, until we got the questions, just wanted to talk a little bit about the flows and policy-based routing that we are applying. But one of the benefits of thinking, one abstract level above, like the simple rule-based approach, like I got message on port 514, I like flag it as a Cisco or Palo Alto, I will apply my rules, is that these configuration tend to be, error prone. They are rusting in time, and usually you have to make a lot of copy here and there, because you have a bit different for a bit different Cisco and another port, and sometimes you mix up ports. When you are using this policy-based routing, you are creating future-proof policies into the system. So when you are deploying a new version or a new appliance, and like label it, flag it, as the network team is responsible for it, all the flows that are applied to the network devices automatically will be applied to the new devices as well. In that case, it will never happen that someone is not enabled something, or someone is differently configured because he has no knowledge. This is centrally managed, and everything is automated. And if something is odd, the system will pop an alert that you connected a Cisco, you flagged it as a Cisco, but it looks like a Sonic wall. Didn't you switch up something? So that's really good to have some like an eye that always checking that if the system is working as it intended.
So I'm going to start with the first question here, guys. Some of the other vendors claim 80 to 90% reduction. How do they do that?
It's easy. If you drop the traffic, then it's 90%.
I think one answer would be the mix. That's very important in the kind of transformation one is willing to make. There are very verbose and very redundant logging protocols out there. For instance, some form of Windows logging includes structured data as well as render data. So everything is duplicated, and the render data is very nice. That's the thing you see in an event viewer, and you probably don't need both. And dropping the rendered text means like 60% less data.
And there are a lot of different tricks, like DNS logs. A lot of DNS have internal DNS queries, which is usually not that important if you want to detect malwares, because it's very rare that an internal DNS query will result in some CNC server. Those are a lot, and servers make them all the time, based on the TTL whatsoever. So you can drop all that, for example. There are cases when your firewall or proxy logging for an action like 10 different kind of logs, because it's like, I don't know, traffic log, flow log, analytic log, etc., etc. And those you can group together. If you just curious, where the IPs were going, what's reaching, was it a drop or a low? Because that's usually what the analysts are looking for. You can easily concise 10 events into one. Here is your 90. These are just, on top of my head, in security, and not just in security. See application logs. I've seen customers enabling debug log, because what if something happens? And this is the cases when you have to, ask yourself, where I want to store my debug logs. Do I want to pay a lot of money into the SIEM, for example, Splunk or CrowdStrike or whatever? Or it is good to have it in an archive in S3, the debug logs. And if something happens, I can just reread that and only have the, error warning or info level logs into the analytics system. So each of these environment different. There are generic rules that we can apply from day one or day one, and there are a lot of things that we can help a company as a whole to refresh the collection strategies, refresh the rules, and see where you can save this. That's why it's very important that at Axoflow we are not just providing a technology that eats protocol A and puts data in protocol B. We actually helping you improve your whole infrastructure.
Thanks. Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question. Can you detect format changes of, say, an appliance?
Yes. That's an interesting one, because, for example, Axoflow learns what kind of message is coming from a specific host. So we don't have to do, the whole classification all again. But if the classification, okay, but the parsing fails, that means that the system tried to parse something that it's, not that what it used to be. So we reclassify at that point, and we will either say that, yeah, this was, classified as Cisco ASA, and now it's unidentified because something happened, or we say that, yeah, it was Cisco ASA, but now it's, Cisco ASA version 2 or whatever, if the system understands it. And the system even can suggest that, what about changing that because you upgraded it or you switched the router.
Can I reduce custom logs?
Absolutely. There is, and sorry, Balazs, you can take questions as well. I'm just.
Right.
So there is different approach to this. One is what I showed you. You can do it manually, and if it's very custom and just a quick win about just filtering some type of messages that you can do on the flow screen. If it's like a third party but custom, we can help with that. And in large infrastructures, when there is a lot of application, we are working together on customizing our application database for the customer. That's like part of a larger integration process. It very much depends on how many different kind of application has and what is the benefit. If we automatically Axo Router automatically identifies it, that means that wherever you put down an Axo Router and the SAP application start ingesting, it will work out of the box.
And what about performance impact of reduction?
I think I will let Balazs handle this because it was working in the past 2 weeks to improving performance a lot.
So my past is that I was the original founder of SysLogNG, and that's a tool that's regularly used to feed SIEMs in whatever shapes or forms. But one of the motivations there was to be the best performing log management agent, basically. So that can easily do 500,000 messages a second on a single core. And obviously, performance does matter now for us this time around too. Obviously, classification and parsing and reduction, that takes a toll. So 500,000 messages a second on a single core doesn't work anymore, but we're looking at it at the same way, trying to improve it to the best we can. And we can easily send terabytes of logs on a single server class computer to your SIEM. So I don't think that's an issue. It's like, depending on the type of log that we need to analyze and classify, it's like somewhere between 30 and 10,000. More complex ones, maybe 10,000 a second per core. That adds up like to a terabyte per core, basically. So like I said, terabytes of logs every single day to your SIEM is usually enough. And if it's if it proves to be a bottleneck, then we can always scale it out and use more hardware resources. So I would say that should be enough.
Okay. There was one here I wanted to ask. Is it possible for me as a customer to add patterns to an automatic reduction?
That part, we try to collaborate with customers on things that we don't know. So we tend to productize new patterns. So we would invite everyone who has some form of device or data source that we don't support yet, and we would want to integrate that into the product. But certainly anyone can still use rules to do parsing and reduction.
Can I detect anomalies like sudden peaks or missing logs?
Do you want to take that, Sándor?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the benefits of having a whole overview of your system end to end and storing the metric information. So anomalies and it's a very common use case, like you allocated the budget for your team, like 2 terabytes a month, and we can apply alerts like, based on your usage, your budget will be out in 2 weeks. Like whatever you would do in a cloud environment or a web application. So you can apply all these necessary kind of alerting and predictions for that. So it will actually save you the money before you spend it.
So, you're still welcome to drop any more questions in. If anything comes in, we'll happily answer it. If you think of something that you wanted to ask that we didn't ask, or if there was something you thought we were going to address that we didn't, please pop us an email. It's really easy to get started with Axoflow. You can reach out to us through the website. Hold on, close that. And I want to mention also next month's webinar, which is on solving malformed messages and how we use Axoflow to first identify and then resolve malformed messages that you might be consuming or having to work with. That's on February 9th, same time as this one. So hopefully we'll see you there. You can go to the website to sign up for that. You'll also be receiving an email pretty soon relative to that as well. And otherwise, that wraps up today's webinar. There's the contact information from all of us. There will be a recording of this webinar placed on our website as well. You can come back and check it out. Please point your colleagues to the website as well and have them take a look. And if there's anything we can do to help you improve your security data quality, please don't hesitate to reach out.
So with that, thanks a lot for your attention. And as Neil pointed out, if you have any questions, just shoot. We're available.
Please join us next month for the malformed messages. That should be a good one.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.